So I'll kick off today by talking a little bit about the origins of the hunt for 0 Point, how it all started. Back at the end of the 1980s, I was working for a magazine called Jane's Defence Weekly. Jane's Defence Weekly still is, famous for its coverage of aerospace and defence matters, really getting under the skin of the industry and military matters, and I was very privileged to be its aerospace editor for about 12 or 15 years. Back at the end of the 80s, we were just beginning to see the opening up of some very secret defence programs in America. 1988 was a time when the stealth fighter was revealed to exist. Hard to believe, looking back now, that something like a whole squadron of aircraft can be spirited away and hidden, but that was true with the F-117. That was a secret program, but in '88 it was revealed to be true, and in the run-up to that announcement, myself and a good many of my colleagues became fascinated by all these rumours of secret aircraft out in the southwestern desert of the United States being sighted, many of them being mistaken for UFOs. So as a reporter, in fact more than that, as a senior editor in Jane's at the time, I had this fantastic access to the military defence and aerospace establishment. And I started to ask questions about these secret programs, and the more that happened, the more I realised that there was just so much out there that I wanted to know. And being an intensely curious person, I thought, well, if I were to go on a journey to find out the most secret thing that could possibly be hidden out there, what would I be looking for? And just around the time that I decided that the most secret thing that the military aerospace defence establishment of the United States, the most powerful country on earth, could cover up, and having decided that that would be a secret propulsion system, almost like manna from heaven, this gift literally dropped onto my desk. When I worked at Jane's, I don't know whether it's still true, but I guess with email it probably doesn't, it's not relevant anymore, but back in the day we used to have all of our mail opened centrally, and so the mail would come in, it would get opened, and it would be put on our desks. And on this particular morning, I think it was around 1990, 1991, I came into work, sat down at my desk, looked at my post, and there was this article. And the article was a photocopy from it looked like an old magazine, and it had a picture of something that looked pretty much like a UFO, a kind of cigar-shaped UFO with this sort of guy in a pilot's uniform, a military pilot's uniform, stepping down a ladder onto a desert lake bed. And underneath this picture it said, "The G engines are coming." And I thought, what the hell are G engines? And I was literally about to chuck this bit of paper in the bin when I read the first paragraph, and it started to talk about a whole bunch of aerospace companies that I was intimately familiar with investigating anti-gravity. Now, anti-gravity, a bit like UFOs, particularly if you worked in something as august as Jane's Defence Weekly, as I did, was something that you never ever talked about. It was a taboo science. It was culled straight from the pages of sort of tacky science fiction comics and books, as were UFOs themselves. So I started reading this first paragraph a little trepidatiously, and but it mentioned all of these companies like Bell, like Lockheed, like Douglas, and one or two others. And knowing of these companies and their modern day equivalents, I thought, well, this is curious. So what on earth were these companies doing, supposedly investigating anti-gravity way back in the 1950s? This photocopied page being from an unidentified magazine at that point from 1956. And the way it was talking about this so-called anti-gravity revolution, it was really clear that these companies genuinely believed what they were saying, which was anti-gravity was around the corner, it was going to revolutionize the way we lived in, no more noisy jet engines, no more dirty propellers, it was going to be a brand new era, and we were all going to be flying around in little flying saucers like the Jetsons. And so I then very nearly chucked it in the bin as well. But I thought, well, hang on a second. Yeah, here I am. I'm in this very well known within the circles of the aerospace and defence establishment publication. I can ask questions about these programs and see whether people really were checking them out as the article said they were in the 1950s. So I called one or two people, and actually I got through to a very great source and contact of mine at Lockheed Martin, as it now is, and I asked her whether she was familiar with this stuff. And in particular, I asked whether she could find one of the people quoted in this article, a guy called George Trimble. And George Trimble worked for a part of the Martin Aircraft Corporation for their most sort of cutting-edge research arm called RIAS, R-I-A-S. And he was really the guy who was talking most about this whole supposed anti-gravity revolution. And Martin, being a heritage company from Lockheed Martin, I asked my contact at the press office whether she would see if she could find George Trimble, who must, I guessed, be in his 80s at that time, and put the question to him and say, hey George, were you really preoccupied with anti-gravity in the mid-1950s? And did you really believe what you were saying, which was this anti-gravity revolution was just around the corner? And I sort of forgot about this conversation I had with the PR, my PR contact, until she rang back a few days later. And she literally said, do you know what? I got an interview set up with this guy. He was all ready to talk to you. And then something happened between that initial approach to him and today, when he rang up sounding very agitated, saying he didn't want to speak to me, he didn't want to speak to anyone about this whole anti-gravity subject. And for me, that's the PR department of Lockheed Martin, to leave him well alone. Which of course I respected. I didn't want to go around troubling old men in their 80s about things they didn't want to talk about. But that really was the inciting point, as they say in business circles, that really got me intrigued about this whole subject. And I thought, okay, so maybe there really is something to this. Maybe there really was a secret program or some kind of program going in the 1950s, and maybe there was some kind of a breakthrough. Maybe there was some technological breakthrough that got all of these guys talking about it in open forum in the mid-1950s. But then suddenly in a few years afterwards, so in the sort of 56, 57, 58 time frame, it appeared possibly as if there might have been some kind of breakthrough. And at that point, the men in black stepped in and said, you're not going to talk about it, we're going to shut this down, and it now becomes totally secret. Oh, and by the way, anyone who sees a UFO out there we're going to have a little go at them too and make out like this whole area is full of crackpots. So that should totally put people off ever investigating this subject. Until, of course, in 1990 or 91, yours truly comes along and thinks, this could be a rather interesting journey. And I'll tell you what transpires on that journey in my next vlog. So please subscribe to my channel. I have Twitter and I have Facebook, and you can find me at I am Nick Cook.